Women make up 70% of the healthcare workforce, but only 20% of its leadership. On Her Story, we'll explore the careers of bold and influential women from Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill and learn how they've overcome the odds. I'm your host, Sangela Jane, and this is Her Story, a program where we explore what's beyond the glass ceiling. Well, it's my honor to welcome Dr. Kimberly Manning, Professor of Medicine and Associate Chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Department of Medicine at Emory University School of Medicine. In addition to her faculty role at the university, Dr. Manning is also the co-host of the Human Doctoring podcast and has a very popular blog called The Reflections of a Grady Doctor. Kimberly, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the origin story. I mean, you have just built a phenomenal career for yourself and have carved out this niche of really a medical influencer. What inspired your interest in medicine?
I just have an interest in people. So I think I've always loved people. And I tell students and of all ages all the time that, it's not like a little cherub flies out of the sky strumming a harp to tell you, this is what you're destined to do. I think what I knew is that I like people, I'm good with people, and I had great influence from my parents, seeing what servant leadership looks like. So I imagine wherever I ended up, it would be something involving serving people and using those, connectedness skills, I guess, if you will, just to help people feel safer and better and to thrive.
The people, but interest in medicine, I would say a big part of the niche that you've carved out for yourself really has been in communication. And a piece that you started early on was with writing. How did you, it's hard enough to train to be a clinician and just focus on patient care, but what inspired really kind of the path to saying, I'm going to actually start writing as well?
I always liked writing. I would say it really started in middle school when I had a teacher affirm me as a writer and really challenge me. I remember writing an essay for this teacher, Miss McNeil, may she rest in peace. And I remember her marking it all up with this red ink pen, and she had this like very particular cursive, and I got like a B- on it. And I remember really being offended, and she told me that she thought I was a much stronger writer than what I had offered her in that piece of paper. And so over the course of really the 8th grade, I would really, really be pushed by her to become a stronger writer. And so I think what happened by the end of that is that I knew that I could write. And I do think that that is half the battle for a lot of people, this idea that, you can do something. But it got kind of put on ice for many years. And when I joined faculty at Grady, or the Emory at Grady faculty in general medicine, I did a faculty development program in my first year on faculty. And as a part of that faculty development, we were asked to write longhand something called a critical incident report. And I wrote this thing longhand, and we read them in our faculty development group. The person leading the group was my division chief, who pulled me aside later and said, that was really, really good. You should type it up and you should submit it somewhere. And I had just never heard of anybody submitting an essay to a peer-reviewed journal. And he's like, oh, yeah, you could do that. And so my first piece, that piece that I'd written longhand, nearly verbatim, I typed it into a Word document and sent it. I was planning to send it. I was trying, where do I send it? And he suggested I aim high. And so I sent it to JAMA. It skipped peer review. It went straight. I got an email straight from the editor-in-chief that said, we want to publish this. And we were really moved by what you wrote. And it kind of took me back to middle school, those very first moments of affirmation from my teacher, this combination of this faculty development and then writing something and having another external party affirm my writing. It told me something that I knew already, but just in a different way. And I think I share that, Sangela, because I think that there are people out there who have these sort of dormant talents and potential things that they can do in them. But they've kind of decided that because I do medicine or because I do this thing or that thing, there's really not a place for that. That's something from this prior life. But I'm always interested in finding ways to, genuinely intersect the who of who we are into the now of where we are.
That's great perspective. So, on that affirmation piece, was it after that JAMA piece that you said, I'm going to really do this on a more regular basis? I mean, your blog has become really a household name in the industry. It's won several awards. I mean, what was that a little bit of the push to pick that back up, or how did that process unfold?
Yeah, well, because I'm a nerd, I will tell you that though I read the book later, this me starting my blog sort of harkens to this book, and there's a book called Peak by I think Eric Anders or something like that. You'll have to double check the author. That being said, a part of this book, Peak, is all about how you master something, and the way we master anything is through deliberate practice. And so had that piece accepted, I submitted a couple of other pieces to journals, and I found that journals have parameters. Like you need not more than 1,500 words. You can't use slang. If you're trying to express something a particular way, you may need to adapt it to their needs. And I really wanted a place to start practicing writing without rules. And if everything that I wrote was something that I was submitting to a journal, I felt like it was holding me back. And so I started my blog really, not because I thought anybody would read it other than my mom, honestly. I mean, I started it because I wanted a place to write without rules, and I wanted a place for deliberate practice. And so, I was when I was, most prolific on my blog, which was probably up until I'd say about 2017. I was writing, 1,200 and 1,500 word essays a couple times a week. And I could use slang. I could describe dialogue in ways that were authentic to my lived experience as a Black American, caring for many Black Americans. And there were just things that I could express that I didn't have to wait for somebody else to approve. And the neat thing about blogging is that you hear back from people. It's interactive. People would read it and then comment and say things. And I could really get a sense as what to think, what things really grabbed people, or what things people were hungry to hear more about.
That's so powerful. I'm curious, as a little bit of a failed academic myself, I have so much respect for those who not only can write, but write in the context of juggling multiple priorities. How do you hold yourself accountable given all the different things that you're juggling on your plate to make sure that you were carving out the time to write all of that?
I will first say that I'm a work in progress, and I never like to come across like I have it all together. I forget things that are on my calendar. Look at my phone and realize that somebody has an orthodontist appointment and I double booked myself, So the first thing I do is I'm kind to myself, and I realize that I'm a human being. And I try to show that to other people, particularly those that I mentor, so that they don't try to aspire to perfection. Because the closer I get to people, even that are successful, I don't know anybody that's perfect. What I will say though, and then I learned this late, I wish I had learned it sooner, is that I'm really surgical with my no's. And when I say surgical, I mean, when I say no, I say no. Not no with, a bunch of explanatory commas on the end where it becomes a dialogue. If I don't believe that something is something that I can do to the best of my ability, or if I don't want to do it, I say no. And sometimes I say no, and there's somebody I can sponsor for the position. But sometimes I don't even have the time to do that. So, I believe that a surgical no makes way for complete yeses. And now that I've learned how to say no, and also to value relationships, because as I told you before, I love people. And, if a person with whom I have a connection, or somebody that I'm working with in a professional capacity asks me to do something, even if it could be a little bit inconvenient in my schedule, because I value our longitudinal relationship, I will make the time for it. But you get asked as you get more senior, and particularly if you are, if you have a lot of intersecting identities, you hit the mark for a lot of things. You're like, ooh, Black, female, senior faculty, ooh, like let's, and I'm aware of that. But I have to take care of me. I have to avail myself to my children, to my friends, to my partner. And time is, not a renewable resource. It's not. And so I'm really, really clear about my no.
That's such an important reminder for all of us. And so
Hmm.
thank you again for spending some time with us today, because I know how precious your time truly is. But I think that's a really great reminder for all of us. As you know, on this show, we like to ask all of our guests, a little bit to kind of your early origin story. In some ways, you probably didn't envision, the day to day that you're living right now in those early days. But do you consider your foray into healthcare leadership to be more accidental or intentional?
I have to say, probably both. I try to operate in intention most of the time. I heard somebody speak once, and this leader was talking about, trying to learn how to do the things that only you can do, or that you are the best one to do, and then to delegate the other things that other people could potentially do, but then just kind of keep track. And I think one of the things that I used to do wrong is that I would just try to take on everything, at one time. And then I started to look a little more carefully about, what's for me to do. And what can happen sometimes, I think, is that you see another person's trajectory and you feel obligated to follow that trajectory. So the part that was intentional is that I know that I have effective leadership skills and I have a unique leadership style. I know that. And so I knew that, as a person who is a connector of people and who loves people, I imagine myself in some leadership role. But it took me some time to appreciate what role would be for me. Right. So, right now, like I do not aspire to be, the dean of an entire medical school. I don't. And but I do, we do need people to aspire to do that. It is just not what I aspire to do. And it is really because I realize that there's some things that I need. I need a certain amount of clinical time with my patients. I need a certain amount of face time with learners that is intimate. I need a certain amount of time with my family. And, with leadership comes a lot of sacrifice, and you can't do everything. So there has to come a place where you take a few steps back and you say, what will fulfill me, what will make me happy, and when I am gone, what with my talents would make the most impact. And I think I'm sort of a boots on the ground person. I sort of need to be in the mix with the learners in the educational environment, in the clinical environments. But I know some leaders who do an amazing job, not in the clinical environment, but who are truly essential. So we need all different types. And I think for myself, I started to appreciate where I fall in that hierarchy, and not feel bad, um, for not wanting to do what some other person is doing.
That self-reflection that you're talking about is really a strength that leaders should have and can have, and you're really setting the tone that there are so many different paths and career options that you can have. And for some, doing the dean path in academic medicine is in fact their calling, but for others, kind of to your multiple interest pieces, there are ways to kind of put those pieces together. And so I think it's exciting to see that our industry is more welcoming of that and appreciative of some of these different cross-functional ways of thinking. To that point, you've been a really big champion of elevating underrepresented voices in medicine. And to kind of borrow one of the questions I know you like to ask others, what is your why?
I like to be comfortable in my skin. For a lot of people who look like me, or who come, from historically excluded backgrounds, the way that you succeed in majority environments is through code switching and becoming somebody other than who you are when you're in professional environments. And I learned, when I was a resident and when I got to the end of my residency, I learned that, you often get rewarded for it. And because of that, you keep doing it. But I also realized that it's a thing that can burn you out and exhaust you. And exhaust you because you are using up a lot of cognitive and emotional energy on being somebody other than who you are, playing a role. And so what does that mean for somebody like me? I mean, I'm from Inglewood, California. The neighborhood I grew up in is predominantly Black and Mexican. I went to a historically Black college, Tuskegee University, and then from there went to a historically Black medical school. I was 25 years old the first time I stepped into a space where I was the only one like me. And so it was hard work for me to, start to assimilate with all my might in this environment while trying to become a doctor at the same time. And again, I figured out how to do it and was rewarded for it, but would come home like mentally tired. I would feel lonely. I would, go through all these things. And I decided when I got ready to leave, my residency program, uh, I was not going to do that anymore. I was going to try really hard to break this habit of morphing into somebody else every time I came to work. And to be clear, my residency program did not demand this of me. This was a culture thing. This is a culture thing that happens to a lot of people who are not, cis het white individuals, right? So I said, my first language is African American vernacular. Instead of me dividing people into black and white, I'm going to divide people into formal and informal. If I'm in a formal environment, I will be formal. Right? I'll be like, I do that with, my mother's friends, But as I get to know you, if I afford you the opportunity to relax yourself some and speak about and make reference to the things that are sort of a part of your culture, I am not going to hide that about me. And the more senior that I get, Sangela, the more I know how critical that is, because if I present as my entire self, as a leader, a full professor at a place like Emory, what is that saying to this 21-year-old first year medical student? I don't want you to do what I did. I want you to just figure out how to be a doctor. I don't want you to try to figure out how to be a doctor and how to get you a PhD in assimilation. No, that's a waste of your energy. So, you learn Krebs cycle, please. And then be yourself, and if that means for whoever you are, right? If that means you telling me about, Diwali, you're telling me about what happened when you and your family celebrated Eid. If you're telling me about, how on your birthday, your family from Mexico sings you Las Mañanitas, whatever it is, I want you to be able to do that too, and not have to hide that and only bring it out when you're around people who look like you. And that's really my mission. That is my mission, is for people to be able to be their entire selves and for us to shake up what is normal and to, squash what we call other.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about formal and informal is, we've had a couple of guests on this show kind of share very similar sentiments, but from a gender perspective. And so how many of us women feel, particularly women of color, to kind of hide like the physical attributes of, how we dress or how we do our hair or whatever that may be, to kind of conform to, what we maybe have historically believed to be the norms of a leader. How do you kind of think about some of the cultural pieces that you just talked about, but also just the nuances of being a female in the industry?
I think, again, this goes back to intersectionality and how it is tough. I admit, I think a lot about being a woman in medicine, but probably the most urgent of my identity is being a Black American and a descendant of slavery. And so whenever I think about one, I have to think about it in the context of the other. Which is different than some of the other guests that have probably been here, because that may not be their lived experience. I do find that the double whammy of being a woman and a woman of color at the same time, it just pronounces people's biases even more. They get a sense of who they think you are. If I disagree with you, what biases do you have about an assertive Black woman speaking to you? Is it, do you think that this is a tantrum? Do you think that I'm angry? What do you think this is? And then, if, I present in a way that probably is, traditionally feminine. So I like dresses, and I like some things that, that sort of meet a sort of traditional, what people think of when they think girl stuff, right? And we know that we're in a space now where gender is such a fluid thing, and that it is, but regardless of that, people still have their biases because of what we see every day. So with each thing comes some idea that somebody has, right? Woman in dress, in lipstick, I think this. Woman who is Black, who is disagreeing with me, I think this. And what I have to do is know that is going to happen. I walk into spaces knowing that that's going to happen. And so I try my best to be prepared when I come into settings, but also have a soft place to land when I find myself, treated not in ways that are affirming to me. So I make sure that I have women on my team that support me, that I have other, people who come from historically excluded backgrounds who know this lived experience, who can come and talk to me too and support me. And then I shadow box some more and I come back out swinging. That's really the way, that I approach it. But regardless of how hard you go, sometimes there will be people that just have this fixed idea of who you are and who you're not. And it will come out, in behaviors, and you'll be like, yo, what was that? So the more senior I get, the more I'm just honest about it. I call it out.
Right. Well, I love that you're leading by example and you're kind of bringing your authentic self to all the work that you do. And back to where you started around loving people and really communicating. What's really unique about what you're doing is you have this multi-medium approach. So we talked about the writing, but you're very active on social media. You have a podcast. Talk a little bit about how these different mediums kind of inform your ability to communicate and kind of amplify some of these voices. And really, what do you have in mind in terms of the audience you're trying to reach?
I'm a very big fan of Toni Morrison, particularly her writing, but also as a human being. And she wrote her first book, The Bluest Eye, when she was 39 years old. And when asked why she wrote it, she said, so I could read it. It was the book I wanted to read. So I try to tell the stories that I would have hungered to hear as an intern or as a medical student. I try to write the stories that I'm not seeing anywhere. And I try to paint a picture of, a safety net hospital like Grady, or Black people who come not from privilege or who have low resources. I try to humanize those individuals because I get to see that every day. But the pictures that are painted of us, they don't ever look like what I get to see. And so most people who see what I write on social media as it relates to, the patients that I take care of at Grady Hospital, they are almost always from a positive slant. It is almost always countering the narrative that is painted about poor Black people and descendants of slavery. I'm really, because there's so much beauty involved. We are not all slow singing and flower bringing. There's a lot of laughter, a lot of joy, and a lot of people who are delighted to be who they are, even with all the hardship. So I think I'm just always hungry to tell the story that I don't read. So the podcast that Dr. Ashley McMullen and I started together, again, it was something that I hadn't heard. I want to hear two Black women physicians just talking to each other in a relaxed way and being comfortable in their own skin. Ashley is junior to me. She's identifies as a queer Black woman. I'm a 50-year-old, married mom of two, married to a man, and we have very different lived experiences. So also showing, that Black women are not a monolith. We can be very, very different from each other, even though we're all in this space. So I'm always hungry to show the thing that people haven't seen, but that I get to see. And then hoping to permit more people to bring their authentic selves into spaces so that we all stop code switching. Like, just stop it.
This big theme that I'm picking up is, in some ways, whether it was the writing and submitting to journals, you're kind of creating these avenues and platforms, when you don't see it already existing, you just kind of create the opportunity for yourself to kind of elevate your voice and other voices. So thank you for creating those spaces for all of us. I guess I would, a little bit to your kind of wearing multiple hats. You mentioned being a wife, a mother, you're a podcast host, you're a teacher, you're playing many different hats. What advice do you have for other women in particular who are juggling kind of unpredictable clinical schedules and, personal and family responsibilities?
Number one, be as good a friend to yourself as you are to the other people around you. I step outside of myself often, and I do not say things about me that would offend me if somebody said about my friend. I don't call myself fat. I don't call myself dumb. I don't call myself, a dodo. I don't do things like that. And we do that. We do that a lot. I crack jokes with my best friend about our COVID-19 pounds, that we feel like we gained between us, but in a tender way that isn't mean to myself. So that would be the first thing. Be a friend of yourself. Next, women need women. Beware of the woman who does not have women in her camp. Shika and Vinny Aurora will tell you that our text thread is probably one of my primary wellness activities. It's funny, it's academic one moment, it's asking questions, it's getting advice, and we're kind of in different stages, all of us. But women absolutely need women. So get you a street team of women in your corner and nourish those relationships. Be intentional about them. The woman that nourishes your spirit, that you realize like, oh man, I have not talked to her in 3 months. You need to text her and say, hey sis, how you doing? Checking in. How are you? You have to be very intentional about that when you become busy. And then have a mentor or two. You absolutely, I don't care how senior you are, you absolutely need people mentoring you. And that is because to be surgical with the no, you need people to advise you. So there are things that people ask me to do, and I just don't feel like doing it. But my mentors, and depending upon who they are, I have about three. But one of my primary mentors, Jada Bussey Jones, I'll call Jada and say, hey, I got asked to do this, but I kind of low key don't feel like doing it. Like, she will say to me, this opportunity is bigger than you. I doubt very seriously they've ever had a Black woman come and do this particular visiting professorship. I know you don't necessarily feel like going there or spending the time, but you have to think about the pipeline and what this will do for other people around there. What will it mean for you to come and present as yourself in that space? And then sometimes I'll be like, do I have to do this? And she'll be like, no, no, you don't have to do that. That's not. So I think so, just to reiterate again, be kind to you and be a friend to you intentionally, and with fervor. And then two, get you some women in your life and really make sure that you nourish the relationships. Do make sure that if that you aren't doing all the talking, that you do some listening, that you check in on people, that it's not always them initiating everything. And then last, have you some mentors, because your mentors will be the ones that will help you when you cannot be objective, and you cannot always be objective.
That's very well said. Well, Kimberly, this has just been phenomenal, and I have so many more questions for you, but maybe I'll wrap us up with two to be mindful of your time. As you think about kind of the fascinating career that you have and will continue to have, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that you are enough, that you are the best you can be. Nobody could be a better version of you than you. That a delay is not a denial for you. And I have to say, I grew up with great parents, and who really affirmed me. So I knew I was dope. I did. I applied to Emory for medical school, and I did not get an interview. I applied to Emory for residency, and I did not get an interview. But I knew I was dope. And I'm not trying to be funny or like, I'm not. I knew I was a good leader. I knew I'd make a good doctor. And I knew that. I knew that. And so I would tell younger me, don't let anybody tell you what you know. If you know who you are, don't let somebody unravel that. Don't let the imposter syndrome voice talk you into revising what you already know. And what I knew about myself back then, but forgot a few times, is that I'm dope. I'm different. That I have a good speaking voice. I have something to say. It's worth listening to. And my last piece of advice would be one, not just for younger me, but for everybody. I asked my students to do this one day. Take a moment and step outside of yourself and talk about you as you would talk about somebody you admire. What would you say? They couldn't do it. And this is a practice that I do. So it's probably like really a weird thing to hear somebody saying something like this about themselves. But don't wait for somebody to write a letter of recommendation for you to be affirming yourself. And I'm not saying get on stages and say it everywhere, but you will not try anything if you do not think you are equipped to do it. If you do not think you are dope enough to do it, dope is like my highest compliment. You can. So young me, I'd be like, girl, you dope. And you know what? Emory missed out. And you know what? Now I built my whole career at Emory. And I love telling people around Emory that I didn't get in twice. because I still knew it was there. I still knew it was in me.
I love that, and I mean, we are our own our own advocates, right? And I think that's such a great reminder. And so, I guess let's close with our signature question. You are actually a writer, so as you think about the next, chapters of your career and the legacy that you want to leave behind, what would be the title of your autobiography?
One of my favorite hashtags that I use on social media is "Love is the what." Um, and I think that probably will be that. Love is the what. Like whatever. If you ask me why I'm doing what I do, what am I up to? What's important to me? Love is the what. Why am I writing about patients at Grady? Because I love them. Why am I going to get off of this call and get on another call with a college student who's trying to go to medical school? Because love is the what. And so I would say that my story is a story of love. It started with love with my parents, and it has continued with love through the women that I work with, my husband, my children, my sisters, my brother, and I continue to move in love. Love is the what.
Thank you, Kimberly, so much. Your story is just unbelievably inspiring and is playing a huge role in helping all of us in our careers. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Sanjala. I enjoyed talking to you.